give you a countdown.
Thank you.
Okay, and 10.
Good evening and welcome to On the Road, edition 2, here tonight in a car park in Carlisle. Now we're live streaming this, as you probably know, on YouTube, on Facebook and on Twitter. Last night YouTube didn't work, tonight I'm hoping that it is. And part of this, I'm going to tell you about my day, what I've been doing, what my thoughts and reflections are on the overall campaign. But part of it is your questions. And I didn't last night get round to answering any of those. So I've got some of those questions here from last night. Please send them in and I'll finish up today answering your questions to the best of my ability. So the day started off in Nottingham this morning. I went to the BBC, appeared on BBC Breakfast, then hotfoot north to Workington. Now you've heard this election being defined as being about Workington man. In the past you might remember Mondeo man or Worcester woman as being the key swing voters in general elections. Workington man is a phrase that was devised by a Tory Westminster-based think tank, and it's talking about northern males who voted Brexit and who, normally have voted for the Labour Party. Indeed, probably they're the third generation of their family voting for the Labour Party, and somehow the Conservatives are going to sweep up all of their support. I think the actual phrase Workington man is a group of college kids in London saying, oh, of course, those chaps in the north, they'll all vote for Boris. They all think he's wonderful. Well, I think it's patronising and quite demeaning, actually. So I went to Workington, spoke at an event, walked around the town, and what we got was a classic constituency today in the north of England, where you've got a rock, solid Leave vote and a Remainer Labour MP. It is the same story over so much of the Midlands, the North, South Wales. You see this story again and again in Labour-held constituencies, but being represented by a Remainer MP. And of course, as I said last night, and I was banging out that message today, if you voted Leave, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party have completely and utterly betrayed you, because now not only have they broken their promises on wanting to deliver Brexit, to implement the result of the referendum, now they want you to vote again, a second referendum, and the choice is going to be Remain versus a form of Remain. It is frankly the most enormous kick in the teeth. So we did the event in Workington, and that was interesting. I then went to the neighbouring constituency. I went to Whitehaven, a port up here on the Cumbrian coast, one that should be absolutely full of commercial and pleasure fishing vessels. It's not. There's some nice yachts in there. Very, very few people involved in the fishing industry. And I thought to myself, well, that harbour, with Brexit done properly, would actually be full of working boats, supporting families, bringing money into towns like Whitehaven. But of course, clause 72 of the political declaration that Boris Johnson wants us to sign up with, well, it starts off quite optimistically by saying the UK will become an independent coastal state. You think, yeah, that's good. And then you read what their definition of that is, and it says there'll be access to waters and we will share out quotas on a non-discriminatory basis. It's the common fisheries policy. Nothing is going to change. We will not get a free trade deal with the European Union of any kind at all unless we continue the surrender of our already devastated fisheries. From there into Cockermouth, nice little market town in Cumbria. We were very lucky. The pub stayed open late to do lunch for us, and I was very pleased about that. And a chance for a pint on the road, never bad. And it's Carlisle tonight, and a public event that as soon as I'm finished with you, I will go and address with our local candidates. My observation from today, big observation from today, is I think that Tory think tank who've identified Workington man as being their key target for winning this general election, I think they got it wrong. I don't think there is the level of love or popularity for Boris Johnson in the north of England as they think. He may very well be popular in London and the south, and clearly he's quite a big hit in many of those places. Hey, he was mayor of London, he won 2 elections, and that was a massively impressive thing to do. But it's not working up here in the north of England. I would suggest after my visit that actually they rethink Workington man. Now, Boris himself, well, he's been to see the Queen and he's launched his campaign on the steps of Number 10, but it's been tough for him. Jacob Rees-Mogg, following his comments about Grenfell Tower, has effectively been rusticated. I think, sent back to Somerset and told, please don't speak to anybody for a period of time. They've had a resignation. And really, Chris Hope of the Telegraph said, has a governing party ever got off to a worse start in a general election? Now, you might think, in the face of all that, perhaps they'd start to rethink their policy. And I tell you what, I seriously think they should, because last night at about 9 o'clock, story came out that has got some traction today. Our old friend Michel Barnier, who says there is not time to negotiate a trade deal by the end of 2020. That means everything Boris Johnson and Michael Gove have been telling you, everything they've been telling their own MPs, that it's all okay, we'll sort the whole thing out next year, simply isn't true. And indeed, Barnier himself already has said that the next phase of the negotiations will last at least 3 years. That is not, I put it to you, getting Brexit done. And I think what the Tories have tried to do, it's rather like selling you a second-hand car. Say, look at it, it's beautiful, good little runner, shiny bonnet. And then you say, excuse me, could I have a look under the bonnet, please, at the engine? No, we haven't got time for that. We need to rush this through, which is why they had the first Saturday sitting of Parliament for 37 years. And now we do have time to look under the bonnet, and it simply isn't working. I think Barnier saying that today effectively holds below the waterline the argument that we can get Brexit done. It'll all, as Boris almost said, be over by Christmas. And perhaps to make things even worse, Mr Juncker, who's still just about there, Mr Juncker has come out today and said, well, actually, Northern Ireland remains in the customs union and the rest of the UK is tied in to regulatory alignment. He said, basically, this is the same deal negotiated by Mrs May. And all Boris has done is shifted a few things around, put some different wrapping paper on it. But Juncker, absolutely clear that the European Union are delighted with what Boris Johnson is trying to do. It's everything they had ever wanted. They're even demanding that we appoint a new EU commissioner, just so that we can carry on almost as if it's business as usual. Now, you may say to me, well, Nigel, surely, why would you believe what they say in Brussels? Why would you believe Barnier? Why would you believe Juncker? Well, the reason's very simple. They are telling the truth. We are not going to get Brexit done. It'll be at least 3 years. And unless we get massive changes to the political declaration, indeed to the treaty, then I'm afraid we're going to be stuck for years to come. And this is not Brexit. Now, look, as you all know, I've been trying to put together some form of Leave alliance. I think it would be to the benefit. I genuinely think that if I was to say in Conservative held seats that what Boris Johnson is doing is now the right approach, I think that myself and my Brexit Party colleagues could shift a lot of votes towards them, save them, win them quite a lot of seats. So I've said today, look, whilst I want this whole thing dropped, please at least try and do this, Mr Johnson. At least say, if you win the election, you will get the political declaration changed. You will drop the clause that allows the extension until 2022. You will have a hard deadline of December 2020. And you've got to say, if we can't negotiate a sensible trade deal between now and then, we will leave on WTO terms. I'm making a big concession here because personally, I think we should leave with a clean break on the 31st of January. I think there have been enough extensions already, but I am trying genuinely to help the Prime Minister to get into the right position, to get the of full regulatory alignment, whether it be in employment policy, social policy, environmental policy, or even taxation. Clearly, they have got to go as well. I will say this right here and now, that the message, the sort of, great New Deal, this bright, shiny second-hand car that Boris is trying to sell you, will not survive for the next 5 weeks. And if he stays on that course, he has got no chance of getting a majority. He'll even struggle, he probably will, but he'll still struggle to be the biggest party. People want a proper, clear message. And Brexiteers out there are very, very determined. For Mr Corbyn, it's been business as usual, talking very much about universal credit and also, too, talking about the National Health Service. And there's no question that the NHS is a massive issue, not just in this election, but in people's lives. And I think one of the things that we're just not recognising is we have a population crisis in this country. We have a population that is rising by 500,000 people every single year, and our education system, our health system, our transport systems simply cannot cope with it. We are paying the price for excessive levels of immigration over nearly the last 2 decades, and I say that because 80% of the population rise is through immigration and the indirect consequences of it. And you know, I'm not arguing that immigration's a bad thing. I'm arguing it can be a very good thing. I'm arguing we should have an Australian-style point system. But equally, I'm arguing that the sheer numbers that have been coming into Britain make our public services wholly unsustainable. Nobody else dares admit that in this election campaign. We are going to campaign on the NHS, and we have to just blow a hole in this Corbyn narrative that Donald Trump will buy the National Health Service. He told me himself on LBC that was not going to be the case. There's also the argument that Labour give that everybody else wants to privatise the health service. Maybe Mr Corbyn's forgotten it was actually when he was sitting in Parliament for the Labour Party, it was Tony Blair's government that privatised large sections of the National Health Service. Our National Health Service spokesman is going to be Dr David Bull. He was elected as an MEP for the party here in the North West. Many of you may know him. He's been on Sky News for a couple of decades. He even presented Newsround once, years and years ago. And David Bull is a medical doctor, is a well-known spokesman and critic, not of the National Health Service, but a critic of how we spend our money. And what we'll be focusing on is how we can get better bang for our buck with the National Health Service. And a final thought today. I do wonder about my so-called friends in the ERG, the Eurosceptics. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, in 2015 actually used a personal endorsement from me on his election material. Now he thinks we should pack our tents and jolly well go home. And Steve Baker today, I can't believe it. Steve Baker, the chairman of the ERG, the man that called himself, he said, I'm the hard man of Brexit, today has put out a message saying that no Conservative MP should talk to Nigel Farage about getting rid of the treaty. We must all stick united behind Boris's deal. It is the best way forward. So what Baker is saying is that we should take no deal off the table and head on with the treaty as it is right now, completely unamended. Steve, I think you're losing your marbles here. I mean, I know that politics in election time can get very tribal, but you are actually putting party before country here, and I find that absolutely extraordinary. Elections are funny things, political parties are funny things. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that the ERG would turn against the idea of a clean break Brexit? As I say, all is not lost. Nominations close for this election on the 14th of November. There is still a chance, I think, that Boris can shift. He has in the past been shown to be, should we say, flexible when it comes to policy. So we'll see. Now, your questions, and I've got, I've really got to try and engage you in this process. And I've got a few that came in last night, late after the show, and I'm going to do my very best to answer them. Mandy says, you might split the vote. What would happen then? Mandy, we won't be splitting the vote if we're the only party offering a genuine Brexit offering. We want a clean break. We want to leave on the 31st of January. We think we've had extension after extension, and frankly, enough is enough. And as for this idea that everyone that votes for me somehow is going to, and our party is somehow going to come from the Tories, well, you should have been with me today. You should have been out there with Workington Man. There are 5 million Labour leavers who are, frankly, being rendered homeless by this second referendum, Remain versus Remain, North London, intellectual, Islington-led Labour Party. And he says, Do you think Brexit will be done by 2023? Oh, Andy, on the current course, if we stick to where we are, probably not. I think it's at least 2023 on the current course before we get Brexit. But it's still going to be Brexit in name only if we're tied in to all of those demands. Chris asks me, how will the Brexit Party deal with EU fishing fleets stealing our stocks? Well, I mentioned already, Chris, didn't I, that I've been at Whitehaven today and how tragic it was to see just how few fishing boats were in there. Look, under international law, and this was decided after the Cod Wars with Iceland way back in the 70s, an independent state has up to 200 miles from its shores or the median line with a neighbouring state, and the fish stocks that swim in those waters are the exclusive economic resource of that state. British boats fish in Norway. We go and catch mackerel, we go and catch herring. We do so under licence. We pay for the privilege, and if we don't abide by their environmental rules on fishing, then the Norwegian Navy, at the point of a gun, will intern your boat, take it in to a Norwegian port. Now, I accept in areas like the English Channel, this is going to have to be a transition, and there are elements of historic fishing rights, but it's a question of whose rules they're fishing under. It's a question of what shares they get, and we've got to take back genuine control of our fishing. For Scotland and many parts of the North Sea and elsewhere, I mean, 200 miles off the Scottish coast and the northeast coast, half the North Sea, would be ours. It would create tens of thousands of jobs. I've always said, though, that it is in fact the acid test of Brexit, whether our government is brave enough to do this. Francis says, it was great to see you in Workington. Francis, thank you very much indeed. Don't forget to come and see us in Walsall and Wolverhampton, says Anthony. I know I'm coming to Dudley in the Black Country, I think in about 10 days' time. Now, Peter, you are right. No party is talking about immigration. Well, I talked just now, didn't I, about the National Health Service, about a massively rising population. None of them want to talk about immigration. Why? Well, Boris himself, of course, has been a supporter of amnesties for illegal immigrants. Corbyn's Labour Party, who promised, by the way, in their 2017 manifesto that free movement would end, well, yet another betrayal, because their conference this year voted to extend free movement to many, many other parts of the world. John asks, what job is Bercow getting off the EU? Well, isn't it great that Bercow's gone? So there he was today, John Bercow, being interviewed on the BBC. He said, now that I'm not Speaker, I don't have to be impartial. What? I'd never noticed you were. And he says that Brexit is the worst foreign policy decision since the war. We'd never have known. John, I don't know what rewards or baubles Bercow will get, but let's put it like this. I don't think somehow he is going to starve. That's episode 2 of On the Road. Tomorrow, I'm not on the road. Tomorrow is a catch-up admin day. I'm going to be in London. I'm not going to broadcast tomorrow, but I will be on Friday morning. I'll be going down to South Wales. I'll be broadcasting on Friday evening from South Wales. I will still be, I'll be in the valleys on Saturday morning. I'll broadcast at lunchtime on Saturday. Next Monday, I'm going to be up in Hartlepool, and next week, I'm going to be in Cornwall, Devon, the West Midlands, you name it. Thanks very much for joining us on episode 2 of On the Road. I have to say, last night, with almost no advertising at all for a first show, over 160,000 of you watched us. Spread the message, spread the word. There is hope. We are not giving up. We're going to get Brexit. Have a good evening.